Welcome to another episode of the Steal a Moment podcast with me, Michael LeBois. Today's guest is the one and only Hal Rayle, voice actor extraordinaire and coach currently. You can find him at audiornr.com. We talk about the philosophy of performance as well as some of his favorite development of characters over the years. We also get into some interesting conversations about how to develop characters and how there are three major steps in every performance. So you guys buckle up for that one. It's great. Make sure to tell your friends to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. We are currently at 53 subs. I'm trying to hit 100 subs by June. So tell your friends, tell your family, tell anybody who wants to listen to a podcast, entertainment podcast, anything that we are here. We have some amazing guests coming up from the likes of Justin Adams from Channel 4 here in Denver to New Orleans wide receiver Benny Fowler. On top of that, we also have some great musical guests coming your way as well. If you guys are into gaming channels, go check out my girl Pazachick. She is crushing it right now. We have some collaborative stuff coming up as we played The Forest over this last weekend, so she'll have some videos up for that as well. Also, huge shout out to Katie Ionetta. Katie, you are crushing it, girl, as she has now surpassed the 33,000 subscriber mark. I'm so proud of the amazing things that she's done there. If you guys like good commentary channels and also some great vegan recipes, head over there and check her out. Also, keep your eyes open. February 12th, Gunpowder Empire will be dropping a new single called Evil Within. Here's a quick sample for you right here of the video I made for it. And when that drops, you guys be ready for that. You can get it on Spotify and Apple Music. It's a short intro because it's a long episode. So with that being said, Hal and I would like to steal a moment. Yes. Yeah, this is not my normal setup. You get a fancy setup for your episode. So there you go.
Well, jinxies. I like that.
Yeah, my girlfriend's parents have a condo in Beaver Creek. So we are having our apartment. They're doing some pipe work in our apartment. So they're abating the asbestos. So we can't be there.
No, you don't want to be there so much, I would think. Unless you could wear a mask. Those are going around, I hear.
Yeah, I feel like more people wear masks every day, which is, I think, a good thing.
It's a trend. Yeah, I like it. It should go upward.
Yes, I completely agree. I'm going to move this over here. Try and keep it out of the frame at least.
Look at you.
Yeah, I'm managing on an island, so.
Okay. If we're going to go there.
All right. Deal. It's done. They're in the frames now. All right. So I've already started recording just right now, so we're good to go. Thank you for joining.
I'll look at the camera then. Hello, people.
Yes, I'm going to be
this way. I'm not looking the wrong direction.
Yeah, the setup I have here, I'm on an island, so I'm like.
I can see. You're not looking. Hey, Michael.
I can look at you like this there. That's why I moved the microphone.
Isn't that captivating?
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
It just brings it around. Okay. Let's get this thing off the ground.
Yes. So, how have things been with you in terms of how the business has been running for you and everything in general right now through this pandemic? Have you been able to work? Have you been able to get work in? How's that been treating you so far?
I have to say, I'm very blessed. I'm very lucky. I'm very fortunate. I also put myself at risk quite a few years ago and left Hollywood to build my own studio, believing that all of this was going to happen. This year kind of shifted everything into a high gear with respect to people being at home and doing what they want to do and working from home. So for me, this has been great. I turned 3 months of this year into a book called Inheritance, The Last Enclave, Book 1. And it's on the Amazon platform. And I spent the whole time just doing sound effects for it and building platform beds for where the voices should be and a template for it all. And I just immersed myself into my studio and the job that I had. And I gave them so much more than they were asking for, because it brought me delight while I'm isolated and while I'm encapsulated. I could actually bring out so much because I was prepared and had my own studio, had my own equipment. We've been doing, this is the first year that the Simpsons have really gone, oh, yeah, you guys have your own studio. That's great.
Yeah, that definitely takes advantage of those opportunities as well. And I'm excited to actually listen to the book. I'm going to pick it up after this. I meant to buy it and get it and listen to it beforehand, but I've been so busy with the podcast.
I think you'll like the story. If it were made into a movie and had a great editor, it could be another Star Wars thing.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, I'm in. You got me. I don't need it anymore. But you have had a very interesting career for someone of my age, because you are in every cartoon that I watched growing up. I also I had an older brother, so Transformers was a staple in our household. I grew up a Ninja Turtles fan, and we've obviously covered in my lifetime. I've watched G.I. Joe as well and seen all that. So now I get to put a face and a name to those characters that I've always attributed to my childhood. What was that experience like, getting into probably some of the most popular cartoons in history of my lifetime, I guess?
Right place, right time, really, I have to say, and risk. I'd had cancer in 1981, January the 8th. And by 1985, I was in Los Angeles and had an agent and was just landed a part on Transformers. Shrapnel was my first character, and then Snarl was my first character, and then Shrapnel, the Insecticon. And then came G.I. Joe, and I became Deep Six underwater demolitions. I go down 50 fathoms, I defuse 50 megaton bombs, and Colonel, I like to work alone. So Admiral Ledger, the head of the Pacific Northwest Fleet, my gift was that I had voice separation. I could sound like one character and do another character and have a conversation with him, and you wouldn't really know it was me. So that I was in the right place at the right time for that. And it was also the beginning of toy marketing.
Definitely.
Combined with television. So right place, right time. All I can say is, chance favors the prepared mind. And the more you prepare yourself, the more opportunities open. And if you're fully prepared and the opportunity is legit, you can ride that escalator to the top if you want, but you can get off at any floor you want too.
Right. And I think that one of the skills you mentioned that you have is voice separation. And I don't think a lot of people really understand how kind of incredible that is. And it's not very common, as far as I know, in terms of any actor being able to kind of play one character and then have that same conversation with yourself and be able to switch between characters without much lag or separation, or noticing that you're sliding between characters.
Let me tell you something. When you get thrown in the deep end and you're working with Frank Welker and you're working with Peter Cullen and you're working with all the people, Scatman Carruthers gave me the best advice I'll give anybody on this planet. And that is, when you see a microphone, you envision that microphone as the most shapely, most wonderful thing that you want to capture for yourself. Be it a woman, be it a man, whatever it be. Give it a name And then every time you talk to that microphone, try to get the microphone to take off a little clothing. Now, you know the microphone will not do that, but you still want to tempt it. So that's how you approach the listener's ear. You're not so much trying to undress them as much as you're trying to talk to someone who's up an upper scale, and you're trying to get to their worth. So you approach that ear in a whole different way than you do like, hey, I'm a swashbuckler and I got a 60-second VO. Hi there, how you doing? You know?
Right.
You know, so it's all pre-life. And with respect to voice separation, that's just work. You know, that's knowing where to place your voice, whether you put it in the top of the chest, into the throat, into the face mask, into the nose, or at the very top of your head. You know, it's where you send your voice. I'll give you a hint. The letter E. You can use the letter E to ride the escalator or the elevator, if you will, all the way to the top of your head, into the bottom of your Adam's apple, or into the base of your voice. So that's, if you're trying to find where you want to have your character, take the elevator and get off on that floor and use that tone.
What's perfect about that is, I mean, I use that skill in singing. It depends on where we want the tone of the song to be. And the E is what we use for warm-ups pretty much with everything. And that's great. I would have never even thought to tie the two together, and I don't know why. Because they're essentially the same skill. It's where you want to place, you know, it's where you place the voice of where you're singing the part to. You know, if
in this case, where you want to build the character from.
Right. And it's interesting because I've tried, you know, voice acting in some capacities, and I've looked into it and have sent demos to friends of mine who are in the industry as well. And, you know, they've had some points and some criticisms and things that I would need to work on, and still would love to work on at some point. And
can I give you a piece of advice?
Definitely.
Don't project so much.
That's part of the
close to you. Let the microphone do its work.
Right. And that's the theater life of me, unfortunately.
You get in there real close and you say, oh,
yeah,
honey. Yeah, you see what? And then if you watch television, you'll see that the ADR, which is the additional dialogue recording that is done, everybody is talking like right in here. I don't know what you're saying, but I believe that that's what's going to happen. You know, it's all real. So that's ADR. That's building all of the audio around what you're saying. Now, in reality, you couldn't talk like that. You'd have to project.
Right.
But we're not in reality when we're doing these kinds of things. We're creating artificial reality. And the more you can milk from your body, the more you can milk from a character. And the first thing you need to do as a character is learn how to laugh and how to cry. If you can't cry, if you can't laugh and cry, you haven't got the full arc of your character.
Wow. Okay. Perfect. That's again another piece of advice that I definitely will take to heart when I start creating new characters. I mean, like I love doing accents. I took some linguist classes to learn how to adjust accents and find ways to use, you know, glottal support and placing it in your throat and your tongue and teeth placements for different.
And the diphthongal. You know about the diphthongal expression.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, give that thing as many syllables as you can.
Precisely. and it helps a lot. It helped a lot. It kind of gave me the ability when I did acting, like stage acting, to be able to play multiple characters, which was great. And it was interesting because I just slip into characters sometimes. I'm sure that happens to you every once in a while.
Oh, all the time. Yeah.
And you just start talking like a character you've created or you've heard. And I can do mimicry pretty well, but not like I'm not an impressionist or an impersonator I'm not Frank Caliendo in that sense.
Well, let's put it this way. When I was growing up, we didn't have the internet, and I'd see a movie one time, and I'd have to remember the voice and the phrase. So yeah, I became a mimic through necessity, because that was the only avenue of escape.
Right. And that was my generation before. I mean, like, we had a computer in the house, but the internet was in its infantile stages for family use when I was in middle school until pretty much high school.
It still is.
Yeah. And it's that's very true. But it wasn't like the key point of access for anything.
It wasn't. At that point, it wasn't intended to be.
No.
It was an access point for information and also for entertainment.
Right. And I think it's kind of
share
shifted.
your ideas and your social skills.
And your development as a person.
It's important. It's vital.
One character in particular I've always been curious about, and I went and listened to it's Shrapnel. And I love the development of the character. And there's online somewhere, I listened to it last week, is you as Shrapnel reading a poem. Oh man, what was
it? Yes.
And it was fantastic. How did you come up with that character, and like what led to like that whole thing? I love that character.
I was given one line, and the line was, I am Shrapnel, Insecticon - Insecticon. So that's what everybody in Hollywood saw, and they auditioned. Now, what I tell people, and this is true, is that, when you're looking for how to separate your voice, I was already on it. A snarl being right here. That me Dinobot. So I already had that. What's something that's completely opposite from that?
Right in here.
But also, I took the character as that woman from Monty Python, who's actually one of the men, who would watch the French Inquisition and be knitting and going, guillotine, guillotine. So I just took that character
and made it into something like this. Yes. And I became Shrapnel, Insecticon.
See, I didn't make it Insecticon. I just took the Takan.
And created the echo that Shrapnel is known for.
Made a reverberant echo as opposed to a repeat.
Which I think creates such a unique detail for that particular character. Because everybody remembers that part of it. And that was what kind of made reading that poem, and I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. I apologize.
I think it was it 'Twas Brillig and the Slithy Toes.
It was the Jabberwock. Beware the Jabberwock. That's what it was. Yeah. And it added an extra element of like super creepiness to an already relatively creepy piece of material.
You know what that is about? The Jabberwock?
I don't. I know it's from Lewis Carroll's Adventures of Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah, but it's from Victorian times. It's from a newspaper. It's a stalker in the park. Yeah. And a little boy, he's drunk. And came whiffling through the togy wood, and it burbled as it came. So think about that. He's pushing the trees from side to side and belching as he comes up the hill after you. And Vorpal is the company that manufactured the weapons for the Queen's Guard.
Oh, yeah.
So his Vorpal blade, which would be a stick that he's playing with to be his sword, went snicker, snack. He left it dead, and with its head, he went galloping back. That's his hat.
That's amazing. I had no idea.
Yeah. I've researched a lot of this stuff because I love, like, for instance, Edgar Allan Poe.
Mm-hmm.
Try reading Edgar Allan Poe as a Southern gentleman with that Southernly Gentile voice. And it was a raven softly tapping. It was that, and simply that, and nothing more.
Rapping at my chamber door.
Rapping at my chamber door. Yeah. 'Twas a raven.
Because he was from Virginia.
Dismissive. And again, using the diphthongal, giving it as many syllables as you can from a short word.
Right. And
you find a cadence in it that is deliberate.
Right. Yeah, and what's amazing is his short stories too. If you, I am a huge Edgar Allan Poe fan, and my degree's in literary. Technically, it's literary criticism. My final paper was on a whole list of literary philosophy. It was ridiculous. It was one of the craziest papers I've ever written in my life. 22 pages on a 17-page short story. But one of the things that Poe states regularly is that his stories are targeted to convey one emotion at a time. So, like, the Telltale Heart isn't about fear; it's about guilt.
Mhm.
And
What's going on in your mind? No one's hearing it but you, because
Right.
your own guilt is speaking to you.
Right, but
Ralph Waldo Emerson described that moment. He says, when you perform a crime, white dust fills the area around you, and everything you do and everything you touch leaves a telltale clue for others to follow.
right.
And that's what pervades in your mind. I think that's descriptive. That's brilliant.
It is. And it's incredible because if you think about it, we as humans are complex emotionally, whether we want to believe it or not. And we feel multiple emotions at the same time. So for an author to try and target one and create this innate, uncomfortable feeling through trying to convey just one feeling, whether it be horror, whether it be guilt, whether it be sadness.
Now take that and be dismissed by the world for it.
Right.
Create a genre called sci-fi. Create a genre called mystery. Create a genre and then have everybody misinterpret it. It's like the internet. He created something and gave birth to something that everyone around him said, what the hell is this? This does not fall into any of the functionary literature that I'm used to. I wouldn't let a child read this. It's not for a child. It's for a searching mind. It's for someone who's trying to decipher the fact that this world is out to kill you. Right. And that we are here to survive. And that we are more animal than human. Even as we project the human image, the animal comes out at us at the weirdest and most inopportune times.
Yeah. And
that's what it's all about.
Right. And it's what's amazing about great literature and great performances, whether it be on a show or in a tale or a movie. A character who is believable is something that is, I think, more important than a lot of things. I always say that shows on television, whether they be cartoons or live action, are ruined by it's never bad acting, it's bad writing that creates bad acting, in my opinion. I think a show can die on a bad
let's
writer.
Put it this way. Yes, it is bad acting, but also it's bad editing. Look, our job is to take the written word, which can be a sow's ear, and deliver it as a silk purse. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They give you shit, you pass on Shinola.
You can only polish a turd so much, but you can dip a turd in gold, it's still going to be a golden turd.
Right, but everybody will look at the gold. They won't concentrate on what's beneath it.
Right. And I think
that's called buffing.
And I don't think editors get enough credit as well for the work that they put together. You have to, especially in voice acting,
only as
right?
Good as an editor as your director will allow you to be.
Right.
So it's a combination of two things. It's a confluence of someone who was used to transposing and putting images together to construct a visceral dissolve or a visceral moment of evolvement. I tell people when you're doing voiceover, there's three standpoints. You're either participating, you're observing, or you're reflecting. So if you're participating, you have one voice. It's the same thing. So the writer is doing the same thing. He's either in the mode of participation, reflection, or observation. Participation means the action is going on and you're in it. You see what I'm saying? Reflection is it's now past and you're going, well, that was something. And observation is, from my vantage point, this is what I can see I need to do, and this is what I can see they're up to. So those are descriptive ways of you being able to take apart what is handed to you and bring back something else. Keeping in mind that your audience is driving a car, smoking a cigarette, drinking a cup of coffee, and smacking the kids in the back seat.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's multitasking, and your job is to leave enough of a gap in the information for them to get the thread of one sentence to another, word groupings. This group of words, this group of words. Let them take it in. That's pace, that's timing, and that's using one of those three modes of delivery: observation, reflection, or participation.
That's the title of the episode. That I got it. That's perfect. I love it. Because those are key factors. And theme. Those are key factors, though, for anything. As a musician, just because that's my reference point for entertainment. If you perform a song or write a song, and like I listen to a lot of different types of music, and sometimes the lyrical conveyance is not as important as hearing the music tying into the lyrical conveyance. So I listen to screamy music. I enjoy it. I know Spencer does too. We have those conversations often. But for me personally,
it's performance art.
Right. And for me personally, I like being able to clearly convey the lyrics that I'm trying to present, because that's my one way of presenting them to people. Now, I love music that has that, like has a conveyance where I'll have to look up the lyrics, but once I look them up, I can see them and I can hear them clear as day without any interpretation and having to guess what they're saying. And it's great. But I like having that as a clear conveyance right off the bat so that they don't have to guess what I'm trying to say. And that's the same idea, I think, in
Don't you think a lot of that is placement?
Oh yeah, 100%. And it's about finding the perfect rhythm to what's there, creating a melody that fits with the music. And even if it's a little offset, it still can create, it's about placement.
You're building an arc from point A to point Z.
Right.
So what you do is you build areas where you go uphill and areas where you go downhill and areas where you go through the drudgery. And you build whatever the arc is that you're trying to translate, whatever it is you're trying to say. And that is causative of whatever you're trying to say brings in. So you then have to pull out from the universe. You're a vessel and you're a clear vase and you're pulling colors to shade and to say in as few words, in as few notes as possible to convey the imagery of what you're trying to say. Make it simple, stupid. Mm-hmm. Keep it simple, stupid. That's the bottom line. And I grok what you're trying to say. And if I'm trying to surmise that is indeed what it is you're trying to say.
Exactly. You nailed it. Like that's it. Is the being the conveyance to the idea is, to me, making creating the colors that create the overall image, allowing the audience to see it clearly without having to really dig for it. And sometimes that's not necessary, and more often than not, it's up to the listener to find what they want to look for in it.
It's up to you as an artist to fill yourself with as much experience and as much information as you possibly can, from as many perspectives as you possibly can. Because your audience, you have to bring up to your standard. Approach the business like a tuxedo. Come in with top hat and tails and take off what you need as the situation evolves. But you can put it back on.
Right.
You walk in with your sleeves rolled up in a pair of dungarees and it calls for top hat and tails. Nobody is going to know you can do top hat and tails. So prepare for top hat and tails and know that everything below that is an easy ripoff.
You sound like a guy who grew up in the Midwest or in Colorado. Prepare for the worst and you'll end up being prepared for the best.
Well, Two things. I'm an Eagle Scout, and I grew up in Indiana, and my father died when I was a year old. So yeah, I learned that, and I'm also a dyslexic. So I learned that you have to break your goals down into reasonable chunks and accomplish them one goal at a time, and then thread them like pearls on a line of vision on a horizon. You know, it's always going to change, the horizon. But if you have an idea of what you're heading towards, things will come to you. And yeah, you'll veer off, but you'll also veer back. It's kind of like taking a tack and sailing. You have to go lateral to go forward. You know, you just have to learn how to adjust with the winds and have an idea of where your north is and what your star is that you're heading towards. And that is the message that you're trying to convey to the people, quote unquote, you as an artist have that are observing you. Your job is to fill that vessel. You know, Aristotle said the world is a book. And if you don't travel, you live on a single page. I think both of us can say we know people who are stuck in a sentence, let alone a paragraph.
Yeah.
Forget the page. Our job is to know as much about that book as possible as an artist, so that the people that are stuck in a sentence can shift and lift with that information and get more self-worth.
And I think that's one of the biggest important aspects of anything I've learned from being an artist and an entertainer is that, you know, you can always get better. You can always progress. Your job. Yeah, no one should ever stay stagnant.
Intellectually, every day and don't ever forget, everybody you meet, somebody, you, my friend, have got an expertise in something I know nothing about. So there's a place to come together.
Oh, definitely.
But in a time where people are building barriers, let's try to build more bridges. And
open up dialogue without worrying.
Open up the dialogue on not what do you do, which is like validate yourself to me. What interests you?
Right. What are you
looking for? Find a common ground. Yeah. What's your passion? Oh, and most people, by the way, don't have an idea of what their passion is. I had a great conversation with a dear friend of mine, a little guy, not a little guy, he's 27 years old. I'm trying to mentor him right now. And he's a very accomplished individual. And we were talking about the fact that it's important to create a skeletal frame of who you want to be as an artist. Because you step away from that character, he's on stage or she's on stage. You still have a family, you still have friends, you still have high school acquaintances, you still have a life before all of this. But what we have to do is find a place where we can come together and unite people. Ralph Waldo Emerson talks about the empirical circle, which keeps moving. The empirical circle is you are standing here, and everywhere you look, from every perspective, that's your circle. But as you move forward, so does that circle. And as you move lateral, so does that circle. So staying in the circle means knowing all the information you can, including all the information you can, taking everything in you can, because as much information you have, you can use the shortest amount of words, the fewest amount of notes to reach the audience and say succinctly what it is you're trying to say. But you can't do that if you're waiting for the world to tell you what you're going to be. You have to define to the world what you are. And as you believe, so shall the world.
And I think the most important aspect of that as well, one of the first things you said is the person on stage is a character.
Yeah.
They're not who you are anywhere else. I will tell you this from experience as a lead singer in a band and being in a relationship prior to the one I'm in now. The hardest part to explain to any insecure individual is that the person I am on stage is not the person I am in private. I am a gregarious, intense, hyper masculine, grotesque individual on stage sometimes because that's the audience that.
But you're emoting.
Right. but it's not who I am as a person. One of the things I always used to say to girlfriends when I was in a band was, at the end of the night, I'm going home with you. You need to understand that the conversations I'm having with these people, I am a character. I am not me.
I'm selling a brand.
I'm selling an image that I have to present to myself, because that's what we present to the audience around us. It is never, ever going to lead to anything more than a conversation or a photograph, or a signature. It's never anything more. At the end of the night, I go home with you. And I think that's a big part of it as well. Like,
but you also have to realize, as Beyonce would say, if that ain't on the finger, they're going to look at you, and they're going to look at the sycophants and the bootlicks that come around you, you know, the hanger-oners, some of them female, I would guess.
Yes,
and
unfortunately.
That's where I would venture to say that might be where jealousy enters. And, you know, these women are there for the thrill of talking to somebody who's a rock star. And you know that, but your significant other also knows that they love you and that you're not fully committed to them, so they feel like they have a reason to have that equation. What if I wasn't here? What would you do? You see what I'm saying?
Right. And that's where the development of trust comes in, and the value of exactly. And I think that's what any relationship, friendship, relationship, otherwise, is something we're missing in this world in general, is the idea that we can trust.
I have a theory about how you can build trust. Humor.
Yes.
Because humor is the solvent between terror and tension. It breaks down the moment that you're the most intensely afraid, that you're the most intensely insecure, and makes you leave yourself for a moment in laughter. And that is what comedy was born out of, terror and tension. So yeah, if you find a spouse and you can share comedy, you're going to find trust.
It's the truth. One of my favorite comedians here wrote a book called Tragedy Plus Time, because they say the tragedy plus time equals comedy. And we find the balance in humor. That's a great point. I think that's something we don't see much anymore, is that, you know, humor gets stripped away because of fear.
Humor got thrown out years ago because of political correctness.
Yep. And
if we can't laugh at, you know, let's look at it and be realistic. Every ethnic group has a certain signature, and somehow it gets reinforced by example, whether it's white supremacy or anything else. So you have to say to yourself, these characters exist for a reason. So if we can't laugh about ourselves and how silly we all are without putting down our shields and our spear, or our sword of truth, if you will, then, you know, there is no coming together. There's no common ground. You have to be able to sit back and laugh at yourself. Otherwise, you're taking yourself so seriously that we're going to see something like what happened this last Wednesday.
Yeah, and that's kind of where the concern.
For those of you in the future, I'm talking about January 6, 2020, a date that will, I swear to God, live in infamy.
Oh, man. And what's crazy is, like, if you think about it, we've spent so much time trying to talking about that. And then the issue that I've brought up a few times, I don't get very political on this podcast, but I do discuss certain aspects of life. We spend so much time, and this is an unfortunate nature of humanity, we spend so much time in tribalism, trying to identify ourselves by a group, an identity, a value of something. And it's something that we tend to do as humans since the beginning of the existence of humanity is, you know, men were hunter, women were gatherers.
Self-worth, but self-worth. It's all about self-worth.
Right.
I joined this group because they like me. They want me. And I form my opinions based upon this group because they like me. And I agree with them because they like me. And we're alike because they like me. and we're going to be the same because they like me and I like them. So their thoughts are my thoughts, and my thoughts are part of the people, and the people are sheeple.
Right. And that's the issue. And that's where the creation comes from. Like that, I feel like we as a society have developed this idea that it has to be A or B. There is no C, there is no middle, but it's the extremes. The people only see the extremes of everything. There's plenty of people in the middle. There are plenty of people who, you know, have ideas of group A, have ideas of group B, but don't necessarily think all of what group A thinks is awesome and all of what group B thinks is awesome. There are people in the middle who like to take parts of both. The middle side of everything is not really listened to because the extremes shout the loudest. And then we also don't get to see a lot of what the other side thinks because we've developed as I don't know if you've ever seen The Social Dilemma on Netflix, but we sort of accidentally developed these echo chambers for ourselves where we only see parts of things from groups we associate with.
And I know what you're talking about. That's the empirical circle.
Right.
It's the circle that they're feeding you based upon what you're saying you're desirous of, what your habits are, what your online viewing is. Then they just keep barraging you with more of them. That's the gist of what that whole thing was all about. Was that you're being fed by outside sources, whether you realize it or not. You think that everybody is sending you. It's not them sending you that. You know, so-and-so is, you know, that's them refreshing you that you should get spending more time online. Oh, and by the way, here's an ad.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. It's the 3 cents. It's the 2/3 of 1 cent over every quarter second that mounts up. It's all of that.
Right.
You know, but again, we're at the beginning, the birth of this. This is the infancy. This is Edgar Allan Poe writing mystery and science fiction and everybody misinterpreting what it is. But with time and healing, we will evolve into, my hope anyway. I don't know if you've read Dan Brown's book on all of this. And if you haven't, hold on a second.
Okay.
Enlighten Your Brain. Origin.
Okay.
Dan Brown.
I'm writing
What
it
it
down
does,
now.
if you read this book, it will open you up to the perspective of looking from an empirical upward scale down on what's going on. So what he breaks down in this, from my perspective, you know, take this 2 grains of sand and a little salt, but it's looking at where we've been through religion and how religion has for 2,000 years tried to dwarf and thwart science, and how science and technology in the last, say, 75 years, where technology has jumped information on the human species and the availability to get information. Instead of keeping the masses uneducated with only one book to follow and the artists with only one subject matter to paint, we are now in a time where, think of it, we have to fight the voyeurism to become fascinated, interested, intellectual individuals with an immense library at our disposal. Now, where we take it depends on the seed of our own self-worth. If we can find a sense of self-worth, if we can find a sense of not looking at ideology to guide us, but a sense of truth, and a grain of salt with science, because we don't know everything. We're still learning. But you also have to look at the fact that you can't make broad strokes anymore. You have to make fine lines. And we have to, as a society, and what I'm looking at through this book is that projected into the future, these children that are born right now that are going to be digitized they're going to have digital energy, and they're going to have information, and they're going to have dexterous things and wonderment at their disposal and imagination that we don't have in our wheelhouse right now, because it's not part of our framework. It's not part of our life experience. But what will be their life experience as we look at children, and now, especially with 2020 and what's gone on with people having to have broader internet, more self-connectivity, more awareness of how to use the internet to educate themselves, we can hopefully have a global civilization that's more based on humanity and less on nationalism. I know that's, utopian thinking, but if you can't shoot for the moon, then what are you shooting for? Either way, you land among the stars. But, you got to go for the heights. You got to go for change, and you got to go for vision, and you have to be inclusive, and you have to get self-worth into the mix, or people are going to always gravitate to something that's going to make them feel like they belong, whether it's Nazism or whether it's Scientology.
Right.
It's belonging. It's tribalism, as you said.
Right.
And I have a dear friend who's in Scientology, and so it is what you make of it, as anything is. So I can't tell anybody they're wrong. I can just say that's not a path I'm on.
Right. And I think that's the most important part, is that we can disagree. It's allowed. We are human beings. We do not have to think exactly like each other.
No, but
and that's the big issue.
If we help each other across the river, we've got a friend on the other side.
Yeah. It's that simple. I mean, it's crazy to think about. Like, I have friends on every side of the spectrum of everything that's going on. I have friends who are conspiracy theorists. I have friends who believe that stones cure cancer. I have friends
I'm from a town of 1,200, so I know what you mean.
Yeah, exactly. And I've grew up in Denver my whole life. I've watched it transition drastically over the 3 decades I've been alive to really see how much my hometown has changed. And now that I live in the heart of downtown Denver, it's a completely different experience than it was when I was growing up in the heart of Denver. Like, I am from there. I've watched it change, in some cases for the better, in some cases for the worse. There is no perfect system that will ever fit. I'm not saying that a utopian ideal does not exist, because I'm kind of what's the word?
No. It's like the horizon line. It's always changing.
Exactly.
But if you're shooting for the goal of everybody uniting, then you're never wrong.
No, and that's ideally where I'd love to end up. Is like, if we could work together again.
Yeah.
I would be amazed.
But the only thing you can really do to affect change is to live it.
Right.
You can set an example that other people can go, wow, I'd like to be like that person. I like the energy they give. I like the way they make me feel, because in the end, people aren't going to remember what you said. They'll remember some of what you did, but they'll remember truly the way you made them feel.
One of my favorite quotes of all time is, you are more likely to be forgotten 100 years from now, no matter what you do, no matter how you lived your life within 100 years. Yeah.
Well, not forgotten. You should have if you're relevant, you should have your credence.
Right. But like the normal person, like I would love the fact that if people 100 years from now found one of my songs and were like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Or found an episode of this podcast, maybe this episode of this podcast. And we're like, wow, what a crazy idea from 100 years ago. But like, I would never expect a person like myself, who is a general member of the population with a small platform, I would never consider the idea of me being somebody like, I don't know, Teddy Roosevelt or Gandhi or
because you don't want it.
Probably. Maybe that's where it comes from.
No, if you did want it, then you would go for it. But here's the thing. In life, we can go broad or we can go deep. So part of the empirical circle and looking at the horizon line is knowing exactly the point you want to go towards, so you can go as deep as possible, and not broad strokes, not across the horizon line, deep into the horizon.
Okay.
So the point that, that's what we do is, as we believe, so shall others. If you don't believe that you should be, remembered as a uniter and as someone who tried to bring people together, and 100 years from now that, you'll just go into the blanket of time and be happy with that, then that's what'll happen. But if you believe that your sole mission on this planet is to bring people together, and you live your life and you do your deeds as that, with your mission statement, then you will be remembered.
Huh. It's interesting because you say that, and it brings me to why I do this in the first place. I initially wanted to start this podcast 4 years ago, and I was like, no one wants to hear anything I have to say. What's the point of me doing this? I don't have a platform. I'm just some guy from Denver. Then the pandemic hit in March, and I kind of got the ball rolling on it a little bit more. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. If people don't want to hear what I have to say, they don't have to listen to it. But I'll gladly put this information out there for people who want to. And I take this as an opportunity to talk to people I'm genuinely interested in uniting with and working with and talking to and finding out more about them as an individual, more about what they do with their craft, what they are looking forward to, and how we can impact each other's lives. There was a point in this podcast where I was thinking about quitting because I just didn't want to do it anymore. And I had a guest who I interviewed that day who was like, you gotta find the why that makes you cry. You gotta work with what helps you, what moves you forward. And Colton, if you're watching this, man, thank you so much, because here I am now with Hal Rayle. It's pretty sweet. But it's one of those things, like,
for what that's worth.
to me, it's big, because I feel like every industry has a need or a function in this world, and there are so many people who, to kind of tie this into your field as a voiceover actor, as somebody who does this work as an entertainer, people were railing on entertainers for having opinions, but yet they're upset that there's no new content out for anybody to watch, because entertainers are affected by this pandemic as much as we were. Like, that's the part I don't think people understand, is that entertainers are human beings as well. They are entitled to opinions. Whether you disagree with them or not, it doesn't matter.
There is a certain obligation to putting yourself out in the social strata where you have to allow for people to have their opinions, because that's part of being out in the social strata. It's not easy taking the high road, because snipers will get you from every angle. But truly, to sleep at night and to be happy in life, walk the high road. Take the high road, set an example, be kind to the people you meet. Know that everybody you meet has a war going on behind their eyes for self-worth. They're fighting for their resume. They're fighting for their life in a world that's trying to say, validate yourself to me. Show me you're worthy. Why should I have you in my group? And it's become this distancing yourself from the actual no. I want to show you something.
Okay.
Can you see this?
There it is.
You probably can't.
Yeah,
You see what that is? That's a guy wearing blinders.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what this is called? No. Because that's what no is. It doesn't look side to side. It doesn't investigate. It's black and white. No, 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 no. Every day I face no. Are you employed? No. Are you going to work today? Yes. For who? For myself. I work for myself so that I can educate myself to be ready for the next thing that comes through. I've made a living out of people coming to me saying, can you do this? Has it ever been done before? No. Can you do it? Yeah. How do you do it? Well, I break it down. I know where to throw my voice. I know how to use them and manipulate the audio equipment that I have. Yeah, I can do that for you. I did a book. You know, that was a whole different thing than doing commercials and doing any of the entertainment things that I've done. I mean, it has to be spec on, if you will. You know, it can't just be, hey, that sounds cool.
Right.
You know, you have to know your shit. That's part of doing the work.
And I think that's what people lose sight of.
Oh, it's constant work. No matter what you've done, you're always perfecting your skills because people are looking for new and different. You already did that. I was talking to this friend of mine the other day, my mentee, and I said to him, I said, look, the music that people are talking about right now is 1.5 to 2 years old. So that's where they were 2 years ago. Now they're just trying to sell it to you.
Right.
You know, so everybody's behind the curve on creativity because distribution is the emperor, and just distribution takes its time because it wants to project it to the widest amount of people and get the most in the shortest amount of time. That's business.
Yep.
Now, the one thing I can say to everyone who's listening is remember that Pandora opened the box twice. Everybody remembers that Pandora opened a box and released all the evils and all the negativity upon the world. But she heard a voice inside that box again and struggled with herself, and she opened it a second time. And what she released is that which we should hold on to, and that was hope. Because without hope, you're never going to survive the negativity.
You know what? That's, wow. I feel like that is something that everybody needs to hear. And that's something that I don't think we respond with enough, is that, I mean, all you see in the world right now is people losing hope or fearing for the worst, as opposed to trying to establish something that can create and develop
it is
a better
so
new.
Easy to get lost in what's going on because you're like, think about it. You're in the middle of the forest. You're not in a helicopter looking down over it. You're in the middle of the forest, in the thick of what's happening. Only time will give you perspective. So while you're in that thick, you're in participation mode. You're not reflective and you're not observing. You're participating. So while you're participating, anything can happen. While it's happening, keep hope alive. And hope will give you self-worth for you to be able to overcome. The last thing not the last thing, but one thing I want to tell you is one of the things that have gotten me through my life is that there was a phrase that Jack Kennedy, a little story he used to tell. And that was, when you reach a wall, take your cap off your head and throw it over the wall. And don't stop until your cap is firmly on your head. And when you reach the next wall, throw your cap again. And that's what you have to do with obstacles. Just like the Mexican wall. You go under it, you go through it, or you go over it.
One thing that I learned through my, I went through some pretty traumatic life experiences, and it kind of affected me through the majority of my life up until about 4 years ago, actually. And one of the things that I worked through therapy is that most blockades that we put in life are set by ourselves. We limit ourselves by preventing ourselves, by creating excuses, creating plans. And that Jack Kennedy quote is a perfect example, where any obstacle that you place in front of yourself, you will find a solution to get around said obstacle if you try hard enough, if you give yourself a reason to get over that wall. And you know, getting the hat firmly planted back on your head is that goal and that drive. And that's why I think it's interesting, because that's something that seems to have been stated that my generation doesn't do, that we are not, we're lazy, we're dependent on technology, we're focused on this, that, and the other thing, but not worried about going to college, graduating, creating a family life, yada, 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 all that shit. It's not like that for us. Some of us have just different aspirations and goals, different directions, different things we want to do with our lives.
Different world awareness.
Exactly. And I think that that's one of those things that we can take away, as each generation is different. We've all faced different obstacles and different timelines. In my lifetime, I had 9/11, the coup insurrection that happened on, in January, the fear of Y2K. We've had plenty of crazy shit happen in my lifetime. What?
You forgot the pandemic.
The pandemic, yeah. It's because I'm still in it. I'm pandemic fog. But that's exactly it. But the people in the 20s faced the pandemic at the beginning, the Great Depression. In the 30s, it was going into World War II into the 40s.
They're doing speakeasies again.
Yeah, and it's
history repeats itself, which
right.
is why we need to know history, so we don't do the same missteps
and learn from the mistakes that were done prior. And it's interesting because I think
and learn that you have to keep learning,
right, and keep growing and keep searching for knowledge.
Just because you graduated from high school or college doesn't mean it's done. It means you validated the fact that you're now part of society and you have this much education to back up the fact that you can be a participant in the world. And on what level? That's up to your goals, your resume, and those in front of you.
Right. And that's the thing, is what my initial direction was in life. I could have stopped there and been like, well, I didn't pass the teaching test, so I can't be a teacher. So now I'm just going to go work a desk job or work in retail for the rest of my life. Where instead I took the initiative, went to a trade school, got a certification in specific things, and now I work in an industry that I love, in a field that's
going to be more of what I think. That's going to be more of what the future is going to hold.
I agree.
I actually thought that would have happened by the time Spencer was her age. I mean, when she was a child, a baby, we were going to financial counselors, and they were telling us it was going to cost, upwards to $500,000 a year for her to go to college. And I said, well, then she won't be going to college. And they said, well, you're going to deprive your daughter an education? And I said, no. If the world says there are $500,000 a year for education, then children won't be able to afford to go to get educated. Right. So there'll be something else out there. There'll be some social strata, some mechanism to enable them to find, work skills, life skills that they can utilize to participate in what will be the digital world. Mm-hmm. So I'm saying that in 93 and 94, because I'm looking ahead and going, look, I don't want to get into analog versus digital, but that was the beginning of the shift of mankind into technology.
Yep.
And then we get into 5G, and in 5G, then you're going to see audio, video flying around your phone and your laptop, all because it can download like that. And then you're going to see entertainment change, and you're going to see marketing change, and you're going to see your world change. And what you have to do is learn that you're in charge of your world. You don't have, like we were talking, you don't have to be manipulated by these people. But part of self-worth for this current generation is likes.
Which is awful. And which is why I'm actually happy that Instagram did something about it and removed that feature. Yeah, from their platform. Now, granted, it's still on Facebook. You can still see the number of likes on Facebook, and you can see and they're the same company. But I think it's interesting that a like-driven platform, which is Instagram, because that's what it was originally designed for, it is, how it's changed to try and mitigate some of those pieces of technology that we're talking about. And I think that's really interesting.
All right, now take that, what you just said about the technology and mitigating all that. Let's apply that to a Comic Con. I go to a Comic Con because I'm the voice of Transformers, TMNT, Galaxy High School, The Predator, Marvin the Martian, all these kinds of things. And then there are people that go there because they have a following for cosplay.
Yeah.
And they have huge lines and following. So that brings me into the, like social, what do they call them? Social influencers.
Influencers, social media influencers, yeah.
Right. These are people who don't do anything, but they act like they do. And people say, that's cool. That's great. Why? Why would you put your love or your infatuation and your passion into somebody who just goes, hey man, look how many likes I got. I'm plastic. I'm complete plastic, but they like my model.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's what drives me nuts. Perfect example of this, and I will probably go to my grave with this. I have never supported and will probably never support a family like the Kardashians. I feel like, now granted, they have done
look how many other people do.
Exactly, and that's the thing. I think
look at how many people voted for Donald J. Trump.
Precisely. That's a perfect example.
So you're going to realize that there is half of this country that puts 2 and 2 together differently than you do.
Right.
It's still 4, but what it's for, I got no idea.
But exactly. But my point being, like, as you mentioned, the cosplayers, they take time, money, effort, creativity to develop a character. Like, they take their interpretation of said character and create this amazing costume and these personalities and personas that they create off of it. I love that some of the voice actors, like Erica Hollander, who plays a ton of different anime characters. She cosplays as her characters when she does stream plays of games like Persona 5 when she plays the games that she's a character in. I think it's fantastic. But then you have people like the Kardashians who are literally like, I'm made of an unachievable body type, and I do.
No, I'm not. I'm plastic. That's injections, buddy.
Right. And I have a team of people that I pay hundreds of thousands of dollars a week to make me look like this.
To stay relevant.
Right. And so their television show on regular television is off the air as of this year. But they inked a $14 million a year deal with Hulu to continue the show on another platform as times are changing. And that's more evidence of the transition of media and how it's all happening.
It's just business. You
right.
Remove yourself from the emotionality of it. I understand that you're worked up and you're insulted by it. But you just have to realize that there is an audience for anything.
Oh yeah.
And we are in the birth and the infancy of global streaming entertainment. Because of that, and because of the fact that this generation of people that are participating in it are 80% voyeurs, there's not a lot of people out there going, I use it solely for the education and what I can thrive and all the information that's available to me is the most amazing thing, and entertainment that I never knew, and the fascination of ideas and education and intellectual discussions. No, you hear about, hey man, did you see the latest thing that the shoes are putting out? Whoa, man, did you see what the lapels are a little wider this year? Sorry about, no ties, no, and I'm sorry, you got to have that shirt tail 1/2 out.
Yeah, that.
But this
well, yeah.
But that's reacting to other people telling you what you should be because you have no vision for yourself. If you had a vision for yourself, you would go and buy your own clothes.
Right.
But since you don't, you are manipulated by fashion to adhere to a standard that they dictate you should be.
Because that's what's in this season.
You need to have this coat, this pair of shoes, or at the very least, these socks.
Man, yeah, and it's gotten that bad. It's gotten to the point where it's, if you don't wear the specific type of undershirt that's worn by every person that has some influence, you're
the only thing
nothing.
I can tell you is if you want to get something done in this world and you want to be something, I like to look at two things. One is the Beatles as a group, and the other is David Bowie as an individual. You know, Bowie with what he did with fashion and what he did with gender bending and what he did with the ability to communicate to an audience that heretofore was so closeted and so shadowy. And he brought them out. And not just that, and I'm not talking about gays, I'm talking about, I'm a kid from Indiana in 1973, and I'm from a town of like a small town. And it didn't have the scope for gender bending rock and roll, but I was in love with him as an artist. I thought what he was doing and what he was saying was amazing. I just had to get past the uncomfortability of what he was dressing as, right, and what he was going as. But I had to have enough self-worth in myself to declare that I'm a fan of his music.
Yeah, totally. And
that is again, having a voice is part of self-worth. And what the internet has done is brought people, without having to go out amongst people, they get their self-worth through people that they don't have to be in the same room with. People that they feel like share their ideas, that share their ideals, that share their views. Mostly, I think they're being manipulated.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it.
By people, because this is the only way they know how to try, is to get out of themselves, is through typing and then hoping somebody likes it, because they're too nervous to get out and interact in public and be rejected. We all have to get past the fact that, yeah, no, baby, no is out there. It's going to reject your ass everywhere you go. No says no, but it's up to you to turn the no into a yes. And yes, it is possible. It takes a lot of work. It takes a determination. More than that, it takes self-worth and a goal. You have to know where you're going. You have to know what you want and break it down a little bit at a time to achieve it. And this brings me back to, have you seen Queen's Gambit?
No, I can't watch things by myself. That's the joys of being in a relaheelationship.
Okay, there's a scene in it.
We're working on it though. We're getting there.
There's a scene in it where Gary Chalk plays a janitor, and he's an animation friend of mine from Canada, and very good actor. He expresses to her that she has found her gift, and the gift is a coin, and there are two sides to that coin. On one side is the coin of the coin is the actual gift and the imagination of it. And on the other side of the coin is the cost. What we find in the world is people aren't willing to pay the cost, either for their own self-worth or for the amount of work that it takes to put into the gift. It's too easy to just take a lateral move and move into something else. And I don't want to say, like a job or anything, because I don't want to have that be like somebody else's negativity. No, the only bottom line is below what you feel like your self-worth is. And I don't care what the job is. If you're happy, if you're happy having that job and you're doing it and you're doing it well, bravo, God bless you. And thank you for doing a good job. Because that's all we can do, is be who we are and do as good a job as we can and treat each other nice.
Exactly. And one of the things my mom has always taught me is, not everybody always aims for advancement in a job. You need those people who are really good at being where they are and being happy and content with where they are. Not everybody needs to be a manager, because managers need people below them to help them build that product or that mission. In the field that Spencer and I are in, having people below us help us trickle down that information so that we can delegate and build and work together as a unit. It comes back to unity, working as a whole. And to tie
and the only way to get to that place where you're helping that unity is for you to have self-worth to bring to the group.
Exactly. And to tie it into music for me as well, I don't think a lot of people don't understand how much, to go onto the cost side of that coin, how much one song costs an artist to produce on their own when they're doing it independently. If you
That's
want
why
it,
you have to have your own equipment.
right. And so fun fact, I'm a huge fan of stand-up comedy in general in the world. One of my favorite comedians is a identical twin duo out of St. Louis called the Sklar Brothers. And they have a story about their grandfather that they tell all the time. There are 3 ways to get stuff done in life: cheap, fast, and easy. But you are only allowed to choose 2 at a time. If you want it done good, it can't be cheap and it won't be fast.
See, that's standard business.
Right.
That's good, fast, and cheap.
Yeah, good, fast, and cheap. That's what I meant.
Yeah. But what is it that misses out of good, fast, and cheap? Quality.
Exactly.
That's what stands out.
Right. So if you want a quality product, like for us right now, we do not have the skills as of yet to produce a song that we feel the quality is high enough. So we pay an engineer that we trust to engineer the music, mix it, and master it so that we know that it is the best quality product we can put out. Now, we do all of the pre-production on our own, mixing that and making that all together so that we present him with a finished or close to finished product, so we pay him technically less. So we're not spending as much money.
That's called pre-preparation.
Right. And doing a lot of pre-prep and pre-production helps us minimize the overall cost of what it's going to cost us to produce the product. Now, we invest in ourselves because we have to have the equipment to do that. So like over the last year, I've spent probably 5 figures on equipment to be able to produce audio in my apartment so that I have something to send to our engineer so that he can prepare us to come to the studio. And we work with people we trust. That's the huge difference. I'm willing to pay a guy $500 a song that I know knows our sound, what he can, and he can be a producer on it. He can add in his 2 cents because we trust him. And I think that that's the thing that a lot of people don't understand. There are 30,000 songs released every single day. And for yours to stand out, you need to have something special. And to just like go into Adobe and create a track with no mixing, no nothing, it's going to die in the ether of all of that information that's out there. So you have to do something to stand out. And that sometimes requires paying an extra cost. So that's a very good point. And I would love to have my own home studio. I mean, once we move out of our apartment into an actual home, I'm going to start building a space, my own space, where I can create and do those things on my own, where I'm not in the same room as all of the other distractions that prevent me from working on those things. And I think that's one of those other aspects of that there's so much to distract us and like, oh, what's that over there? What's that over there? Where we kind of lose focus on the things that we really want to do. And I've really found that through this pandemic, I've focused more on the things that I want to do with my free time versus what I feel like everybody else wants me to do.
I think people need a mission statement. They need to know what they stand for. And if they can know what they stand for and what they want out of life, that again, coming back to that self-worth thing, then you can go for it. But if you don't know what you stand for, if you can't decide who you are and what you want to be, that future self, like for me, as a child, I always knew what I wanted to do. All I had to do was live long enough and, keep learning the skills that it would take for me to do it. Now, coming up when I came up before the internet and things like that, I had to learn it all myself. So everything is self-taught. Now, you can teach yourself bad things as well as good things. But the overall thing is I tell my students and other people, if it hurts, you're doing it wrong. So figure out another way to do it. And that's, again, pain is a great instructor on what not to do. So I guess all I can say is that if we cannot determine for ourselves who we are, we can never determine for ourselves what we want to be and how to do it. We'll just leaving everything up to chance, waiting for a job to come to us, waiting for an opportunity to arrive. That's living in want. And a lot of people do that because they can't, or circumstances dictate they're not allowed to have any wriggle room. So time is how you build out of that. I mean, I had cancer. I was 126 pounds. I was in San Francisco in 1981, and everybody thought I was dying of AIDS. And I was a bartender trying to, you know, there you are in a seaside. I'm 126 pounds and I look like I'm dying of AIDS, but I'd like a job as a bartender with all these burly guys. No, that ain't going to happen, you know, until I got my health back, until I got my size back. But what I did while I was doing that was I worked on my voice. You know, so you can work on what you can work on. You can work on what you have and keep going towards where you want to go, and just do what you need to do while you're in where you are. While you're participating, get yourself to the point where you can observe and reflect.
And develop, that's exactly it. Develop the skills that you want for the things that you're going towards.
And just know that that skill set is going to constantly change.
Right. In an industry that I work in, our systems in the last 6 months have changed drastically. I'm sure you've heard all about it. But it's
Spencer's a good, she's a good person. She keeps it to herself. She doesn't bring her stuff home.
that's nice. I wish I could say the same. My poor girlfriend's heard all about the stuff that I've had to deal with that side of the industry. But that's interesting that, you know, I use that as a springboard, because it was a field I didn't even know existed. And now I love it. Like, it's something that I really, really enjoy. And it's changing with how marketing and advertising are changing, and
streaming is going to change a lot of things.
Right. And we access that through all of the things that we do on our side of the job.
And you have to be out in front of it.
Right. And I think that's one thing that Comcast has really been good about, is being ahead of that curve in that information. Now it's moving faster and faster now that more streaming services are coming to fruition, and we have our own streaming service within the company now. And, you know, that makes a difference. And I'm sure once that starts happening, we'll start shifting our advertising more towards the streaming services and finding value in that. But
it will have to.
Right.
It will find, you know, when the timing comes.
Right. And it's the industry moves in, like, the advertising industry in particular, at least on our end, seems to shift every 5 years or so to a new medium. What's really interesting is, like, people have been saying radio's been dying for 35 years. And it's still a marketable system that still uses it. Now, granted, it's not so much the music side anymore. It's still more so political talk and sports talk radio are the more valued advertising markets, because more people are listening to those separately. With streaming services for music, it's created a huge different thing. I can honestly say I have not listened to terrestrial music radio in 5.5, maybe 6 years, but I'll listen.
Well, you're missing out on 120 of the finest songs.
Right. And that's the issue is by actually being a touring musician and talking to different musicians about that in their regional areas, their radio networks are only allowed on average 12 new songs a year. That's one song a month. And there are 30,000 songs released a day.
That's because radio is now owned by giant conglomerate corporations.
Correct.
Who are manipulated by the figures of those that they want to reach, by their target audiences, which are then deemed by advertisers what they want. Now, to give you an idea of what's happened to radio, since 1995, every advertising agency pretty much around the world has gotten rid of their radio advertising department. Radio advertising is now done in-house,
Right.
using the in-house announcers, and you get what you pay for. So again, it's good, fast, and cheap, but there's no quality in it. There's nothing in it that makes your ear, the listener, go, wow, this is fun to listen to. I'm going to stay with this station. No.
And it's mostly local too.
Yeah. And, it's car dealers. It's, it's this, that, it's whatever it is. And it is what it is, particularly here in Denver. There's not a national advertising agency in this town. There's what's it? J. Walter Thomas, but yeah. they only do trucks for Montana, and that doesn't do a diddly squat for the next.
Right.
But what we can, but I don't let that stop me. I mean, I've got Source Connect. I've got a studio. We can work with the world.
Right.
We work with LA. We work with the world. It's like you're only limited by two things: money and imagination.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, I think the amazing part of all of this is I have, like I said, I've been doing this podcast officially been doing this podcast since about June or July of 2020. I've been able to interview people from the UK, from Sweden, from Australia, Los Angeles, Louisiana, Ohio, where normally we would only be able to do this in person. And for me, specifically,
or through letter writing.
Yeah, or through letter writing, through correspondence. Yes. My dearest Annabelle.
That's old school.
Yes, correspondence.
Right, yes.
Yes. But that's one of those things. It's like I've taken this as an opportunity to really try something different and get to talk to the people that I want to get to talk to. And I took an opportunity. I invested in it. I invested not only money, but time and effort. And now I have 53 subscribers on YouTube. I get 25 to 50 downloads a week on the other podcast streaming services. But for somebody who literally started from zero and it hasn't even been a year yet, I'll take the victories. And it's the same idea as I have small goals that hopefully will lead to a major goal. Over the long run, I would love this to be a podcast where I don't have to work anymore and I could do this for a living and enjoy it. But
you know what else you did? You put yourself, you took a risk.
Right. I jumped.
You put yourself out there.
And I think
that's the biggest part about it. No risk, no reward.
Right. You can't just stay stagnant.
If you don't walk off the edge and believe there's a bridge, you will stay forever on this side of everything.
It's Indiana Jones for me.
Yeah, but it is. But that's the metaphor that Spielberg used.
Mm-hmm. Leap of faith.
Exactly.
And it's funny.
But with self-risk, if you don't risk the self, then you don't feel any repercussions. So it's just like that's a nothing. If you put yourself out there at risk and people say yay, you get to feel that. You get to feed off of that. If they say no, you say, well, that's just you people.
Right.
And also it says, oh, maybe I need to work on my performance a little bit. It all comes down to one thing. You, as you believe and as you perform, others will react as you believe. If you don't believe you're worthy of being on that stage and you play like shit, that's the reaction you're going to get.
Exactly. And my favorite thing that I've said over the last few years, specifically about this and my music, is for the first time in a long time, I'm not writing music for what we think people will like. I'm writing music for what I want. And if you don't like it, tough. It's not for you then. It's for the people who want to listen to it. And that's probably going to make me a little less marketable. It's going to make it a little less different, but I enjoy it and it makes me happy. And I don't want to be trapped playing shit I don't want to play anymore.
Well, what you should be doing is using this time to search out, play your music and find your brand.
Right.
Once you latch onto your brand, which is what others latch onto of what you're playing, and then you find your signature, then all you have to do is, your voice is already there. You know what you want to say. Then you just hone it to the audience that seems to be reactive to it.
And what's funny is I love this podcast, and like I can tell which episodes don't hit the mark as hard as other ones. And what I've been doing is trying to figure out how to market it differently to see if I can maybe grab a different audience or find a different place to get more eyes on that particular one. Other episodes are like guys that have zero to small network groups who are focused. Those are some of my best episodes in terms of viewership and reactions and content, because I think there's more to them than just the niche that was created by that audience.
They go deep, they don't go wide.
Right. And that exactly. And that's the kind of thing that I'm trying to establish with this, is not just interviewing musicians, because I'm comfortable with musicians. We could talk shop all day long. We can do all that. Those are fun. I like talking to up and coming. Like I had a girl who I met through one of my other networks. She produces and created her own sports talk show on her collegiate television network that is run completely by women. And it is focused on how women and men can work together to help grow women's sports and the impact of women in sports. And
Bravo.
I cannot wait to see her on the sidelines, calling football games, working on ESPN or FS1 and doing these things that she's so driven to do. And that was one of my favorite episodes because she was so intense and so positive about that. And then I have former athletes who are talking about how their career has helped impact and change their viewpoint of how the world is and what they're doing to help the world, to radio personalities who were talking about how they were discussing the George Floyd incident and the protests in Denver and how it cost them listenership for a month. And that they said that if they hadn't done that, if they felt like for a 1-point rating share, it didn't matter. They wanted to talk about the important topics and things that were outside of the realm of sports that didn't need to, they needed to discuss these things because they had.
Well, these social issues come back to sports.
Right.
We have a great many Black players in a variety of sports, and we're trying to say that Black Lives Matter. And God, I tell you what, I take my hat off to every single one of these guys who stood up to this empirical no and said, I'm sorry, enough is enough. Yeah. And that's what it is. It's empirical no. And everybody gets no. But it's not what knocks you down. It's how you get up and what you do when you get up. So that all comes from self-worth. Again, so what's the alpha and omega of this conversation?
Self-worth.
Self-worth.
You know what? I've taken up an extra half hour of your time. I really appreciate it, Hal, big time. And I didn't even get to cover like a quarter of the things I thought I was going to talk about. We got into some really deep and philosophical processes. I'm very happy that we got to talk about this. But this is the end of the episode. This is the time I give the platform to you to promote whatever you want to promote, anything you need to get out to the public right now. Hal, the floor is yours.
Well, I'd like to say that I represent Audio R&R. That's AUDIO, Red Nancy Red. And that is our studio. Check it out. Maggie and I are top quality voice people who are in production, and we're in our happiest time of our life. So we have a great deal of joy to bring to anything that you want to present to us, whether it's entertainment, animation, anime, commercials. We write, voice produce, we create, we deliver. And, all I want you to do is have a happy life and spread joy to as many people as you can. And if you can use us to help spread that joy, that's AUDIO. RNR.com. Look for Hal Rayle, Maggie Roswell, and know we are in your corner.
That was awesome. I will definitely be in touch about that at some point here in the near future as well. Looking into getting into doing some of that work. I have somebody else you
can talk to in Los Angeles, who's a friend of mine. I've told him about your podcast, and so we can talk about that later. But
definitely.
be interested in.
Oh, yes, that would be great. The other voice actor I've been lucky to have on here is Jason Marsden. And he's a fantastic guy. And we actually developed a friendship through cons, through another friend who's in the voiceover scene, Lauren Landa, who does a lot of anime and video game stuff. But my ultimate goal is to get some more of like the DC people into my podcast world. I've been trying to figure out how to talk to Laura Bailey. She's like every DC character ever that's a female. That's fantastic. And, you know, it's something that I've always been really fascinated by and always been interested in, mainly just because I've always loved doing voices and playing characters. And I didn't ever want to get into theater because I didn't like the idea of theater. It was kind of more, you know, music was more my target.
It just wasn't your cup of tea.
Right. And my mom was like, why didn't you ever get into acting and getting on stage again after you left college? And I was like, because it just doesn't interest me.
And I was never allowed to do it. So there's the other side.
Right. My mom's a classically trained soprano, so I was able to learn how to sing through her. And so the singing side of things has always been there, which has been great.
So right now you're working through the classically trained and the emotional aspect of emoting what you're singing. Correct, and figuring out how to do it without hurting myself. Performance value, buddy. That's watch your David Bowie. Watch your David Bowie. He'll show you performance value. Yes, indeed. Well, Hal, thank you so much for taking time to do this with me today. And all right. So beautiful, man.
Captain,
Take care.
my captain. Thank you.
Have a good one.
Have a great day.
It almost feels like someone else is living my life. 'Cause it